So, world feeling pretty bleak right now. I don't know about you, but I know first thing I usually do in the morning is you grab the phone and you do a quick scroll down the information superhighway, see how things are going, check statuses and all that, and man, it is enough to make me want to take up drinking. I mean, seriously, it is just a non-stop parade of depressing, contradictory news articles, and this politician did this and this politician did that, and they should have stopped it and they should have done this, and blah 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 blah. And you just get to a point where it's just so much angry noise, and you start going, man, is there ever going to be a time when we're not pissy? And the thing is, even before all this, I remember feeling that way for a while, with social media. Is just what a non-stop parade of negativity. And this is coming from me, a cynic, who has always been accused of being negative, And when things get like that, when you get to that point in time when you're just like, man, you just want to release, you want to go back to a simpler time. I think everybody at any point in history, when things look bleak, they always look back with nostalgia at what came before, and this can be in terms of, world events, pop culture, music, anything. But you always look back at the past and go, man, why can't it be like that again? And the simple fact is, one, it can't. We can't go back. Time and people and everything move forward. That's evolution. That's life. No matter what Doctor Who says, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey, it's a straight line. And the other reason is because things may have seemed simpler back in the day, but they never actually were. Or maybe they were simpler for you and your particular ilk, but it wasn't that way for everybody. And that, along with countless other metaphors and social commentary, is the crux of the 1998 film Pleasantville. That, yes, it would be nice to go back and live in a perfect society and a perfect world, but perfection only goes so far, and to achieve perfection, there are certain things that you need to sacrifice. And the question is, perfection for who, really? Who is this a perfect world for? And what happens when you start playing with that perfection? I'm going to be honest. This film has always been on my list for this series. It was one of the first ones I pulled out because I feel it is one that a lot of people just aren't aware of today. But at that same time, it's the one I was kind of the most afraid to talk about. And here's why. I believe that in terms of visual arts, movies, plays, theater, the things that, I specialize in and that I work in, there are works that are just fantastic insight into human nature. There are works that have great stories or works that have compelling characters. There are some that are there just for the entertainment. But there are very few that I would personally classify as a work of art. Something that transcends the medium, where a director or a playwright or whoever, some creative force, had a clear vision and a clear story that they wanted to tell or needed to tell. And they were going to use this visual art form and the various tools in the toolbox that they had at their disposal to tell that story. Citizen Kane is definitely in this category. I do consider Citizen Kane a masterpiece and a work of art. Every time I watch it, I see something new, or I get something new out of it. And while Pleasantville is not on the level of Citizen Kane, I believe it is a work of art. I think it is a beautiful, incredibly layered, really well done film, and honestly, a film that when I first saw it, I was in college. I think it was my first or second year of college. It was 1998, so it's probably my first year of college. I was 18, 19 years old, just starting on my education in theater and script analysis and story analysis. So I got some of it, but it was very overwhelming. There was just so much. And getting ready to watch it yesterday, I was like, oh man, I hope I know enough to kind of break this film down. What is this film about for those who don't know about it? So, taking place in the then, modern day of 1998, the story focuses on two teenagers, siblings, played by Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon, respectively. Tobey Maguire's character is kind of a nerd, an outsider, and Reese Witherspoon's character is, of course, the bad slut girl of the high school. Basically, they are two 1998 teen movie archetypes, and basically what's going to happen is we're going to swap two then modern day archetypes for two past archetypes. So Tobey Maguire's character is obsessed with this old show called Pleasantville, which is kind of a Father Knows Best, Donna Reed-esque kind of mashup. One of those things where everything is perfect, everybody's happy, the stakes of the show are never that high, that kind of thing. But he's obsessed with it mainly because of the unspoken desire that he's looking for a world where there aren't so many problems. They do this little montage at the beginning of them in school, and like one of the teachers telling them, there are no jobs. You're gonna, by the time you graduate college, there's gonna be even fewer jobs. Inflation's gonna be up. And their health teacher going on about, how many people are gonna die from sexually transmitted diseases, and how, and all that. I think something we can all relate to, of just hearing about how much everything sucks and how it's just gonna keep on sucking. And he is looking for an escape, a place where things are not as dire as they are then or now. Through shenanigans, the twins are given a magic remote control, yes, I know, by Don Knotts, just go with it, which zaps them into the world of Pleasantville. They take the role of the brother and sister on the show, Bud and Mary Sue. Which interesting enough, I don't know if the name Mary Sue is intentional. I don't know if a Mary Sue character was a thing back then, back in the 90s. If it is, then that's another layer I didn't quite pick up on, the self-insert character. If not, then they showed a lot of forethought into what was going to happen. So you can see kind of where you think this film is going. Two modern teenagers dropped into the eternally 1954 world of Pleasantville, and oh ho ho, they're going to turn this town upside down, what with their modern thinking and all. And that's how the film was advertised. It's advertised as a comedy. Oh ho ho, Reese Witherspoon's going to show that high school boy what sex is, and oh ho ho, things are going to get wacky. And that is a decent portion of the film. That is kind of the early stages. But this film is not a comedy. At least not from my point of view. I remember when I worked in FYE, yes, back in the days when we had CD and music stores, and I had to file this movie. And it was always under comedy. And I was like, it's not. It's a drama. It's telling a serious story, because what happens is, yes, these two teenagers do come, and Reese Witherspoon does start the ball rolling by introducing sex to she basically takes the virginity of Pleasantville, both literally and figuratively. Once this happens, once this new element is tossed into, the black and white world of Pleasantville starts to unravel, and color starts to come into it. The very first thing that turns color is a rose blooming. Metaphor. Get the visual metaphor? Not subtle, is it? And then it starts with just little things, a stop sign, or a clock, or pictures on a wall. Things start, bubble gum. Things start slowly becoming colorized, and then it becomes whole people. And it just kind of snowballs from there, and this throws a wrench into this town, which has functioned on the concept of things don't change. And now we have a lot of visual metaphor, a lot of implied metaphor of what happens when change. What is the cost of change? What is the cost of perfection? And who is perfection for? There are layers upon layers upon layers of visual metaphor and regular metaphor and all that layered in this film. You could go on and on about everything. For instance, like what it is that makes a person change color from black and white to color. What is it that cues it? It's not just the sex. For some people it is, but for others, it's that thing of when you kind of acknowledge the thing inside you that you've been repressing or ignoring. When you embrace that part of you, you embrace not just the happy face that you've put towards the world, but when you embrace even the negative emotions. That's something I like about this movie, is it's not just a thing about positive change. It's also about negative change. And some people change color when they acknowledge the negativity inside themselves. So it's not just saying, it's not just saying that, this community's so stuck up, it just needs some sex. It's saying, no, it needs to embrace all of the elements, the good, the bad, the ugly, and try to find a way to weave them into the society. I really love this movie. Really love it. And there's a lot to love about it. Let's talk about some of the big things. So first of all, holy shit, this is a gorgeous movie visually. It is beautiful. What I liked about this is that, especially around the 90s and even into today, the special effects of the time were developing so fast. And then, as of now, and I think we can all think of a movie where this has kind of happened, the film genre would kind of go, oh, we can do all of this shit with computers and whatnot. Let's just do everything regardless of whether we need to or whether it works. And it feels like the creative forces behind this film said, we're not going to do everything just because we can. We're going to pick one thing, one gimmick, one core mechanic, if you ever listen to video game criticism, one core mechanic, and we're going to focus on that. And the simple fact of this black and white world slowly becoming colorized is what we're gonna pin our hat on. And it works so well. Because so much of the film is in black and white, this simple adding of small colors here and there, the pink of the bubblegum, the red of the cherry, the red of the rose, the green of the car, little things like that really make them pop. And as more and more colors start to come into it, the film gets more and more like a painting to me. It really does look like a painting, which painting is one of, again, the visual metaphors they use here with the Jeff Daniels character, who runs the soda shop but wants to be a painter, and suddenly discovers, what he can do with all those colors. So you get that as well with the director of, wow, how can we really make these colors pop? And the colors again become another metaphor. The Jeff Daniels character says, when he's looking at this book of art, he says, wow, I bet the artists didn't know how lucky they were to see in that many colors. And of course, that's what we're doing with the audience, saying you don't really realize how lucky you are. Yeah, the world is shit sometimes or all the time, but you don't really realize how lucky we are that we can recognize that. You can recognize, but if you're going to recognize the shit, you have to also recognize the beauty, and that's kind of the path that the Tobey Maguire character takes, because he's obsessed with the perfection. At first, he wants to preserve the perfection of Pleasantville because it works for him. But then he kind of realizes that if you're going to accept the shit of the world, you have to accept the beauty, and you have to fight for the beauty, and you got to fight for the shit. So again, just the colors and everything. God, it's a gorgeous movie, and plays with a very simple mechanic so well. Performances are great. Shouldn't be surprised. Every time I see Tobey Maguire, especially in his earlier roles, there's only one thought that always comes to mind, and it's a weird one, but I always go, man, there's a reason why he is Spider-Man. That he is the best Spider-Man. Because every role he plays, he fits that Peter Parker mold so fucking well. And this character basically is kind of a Peter Parker, and God, he's one of those actors I'm kind of sorry doesn't work much anymore. I looked him up on IMDb. The last film that he's credited with was in 2017. So I don't know why. I don't know if the parts just dried up or he just kind of got tired of it, but he was a very unique presence and a welcome change to kind of the pretty boys that inhabited the world. But he's great, and he's wonderful carrying this. Reese Witherspoon is good in this. I don't think she'd quite found her footing as an actor yet. She was still kind of playing the same archetype each time. Basically, her role could have been played by any of the young actors from around that time. I think she just kind of fit the visual mold because she is small and blonde and kind of perky. So it was kind of interesting to see that physical characteristic now playing the slut who has to kind of find the deeper meaning inside and all that. William H. Macy and Joan Allen play the Pleasantville mother and father. Very, very good casting. William H. Macy's always good. Actually, here's one of the things I like about the William H. Macy character and the William H. Macy character arc that I didn't appreciate originally. I don't think I was old enough at the time, but I think I get it now. At least I have my interpretation of it. So William H. Macy plays, dad. He plays the father knows best, the Robert Young role. Honey, I'm home, that kind of thing. And when the world starts to change, when people start becoming colorized, when they start embracing things and whatnot, of course, the people who suddenly have the biggest problem with it and are the most uncomfortable with it are the people who would most not want things to change because the world works in their favor, i.e., white men. I.e. Tobey Maguire's character, who originally doesn't want that world to change because it serves him. And so they are the ones, especially led by the mayor, Big Bob, played by G.T. Walsh in an excellent performance, who are basically trying to stop the change and become a lot more oppressive, but doing it with this hidden veneer of pleasantness and smiles. We've got to come up with a code of conduct, you know, and let's be proper. You know, I'm not going to get up on a political soapbox, but it's like a group of politicians, and you can insert what you think here, that are preaching things like family values. We got to have family values while they're keeping mistresses and having children out of wedlock. You know, those people who are telling you, yelling at you one thing, but doing it because we got to return America to a brighter, happier time that never actually existed. So these are the folks that, you know, kind of lead that movement. And William H. Macy's character gets kind of drawn into it. Now, here's what I like about the William H. Macy character and character arc. And I'm struggling to kind of figure out how to put this exactly right. What I think his character arc shows is that not everybody who has a hard time with change has that hard time because they are necessarily bigoted or sexist or homophobic or whatever. It's not that they have an objection to whatever the current change is. The objection they have, and maybe it's something they can't even put words to, is that the world for so long ran a certain way, and most likely a certain way that served them. And so from that perspective, they didn't see anything wrong with it. And then when all of a sudden the world almost, to them, seems like it changes overnight, they don't know quite how to deal with it. They don't know how to assimilate. You know, and that's a concept I didn't understand until I became a 40-year-old man and the world changes. You know, there are certain things, you know, I'll be honest here with y'all folks, that, you know, okay, things like women's rights, equal pay, gay rights. These are things that, as, you know, I've always just kind of gone, all right, yeah, why not? Why aren't women paid the same? That's stupid. Okay, let the gay people get married. What do I care? You know, let them. Who cares? There are certain things I can just kind of do that with, but there are other things that have come along that I do take a second and go, well, why are we arguing about that? Why is that an issue? Why is that, you know, things have been this way for all this time. Why is it a problem now? Well, the reason it's a problem now, jackass, is because just because it was fine for you doesn't mean it was fine for everybody. Okay? And I think the William H. Macy character does a great job with that he is a sympathetic character. He's not angry. He's confused. Why did his wife suddenly leave him? You know, why is his wife, you know, not home cooking his dinner? You know, and it's not a thing of he demands it of her, that he thinks that he's keeping her as a slave. It's just that's the way the world has worked for him. And he comes to realize that, and, you know, gradually kind of changes with the times, but it's a hard thing. Asking somebody to change the way they think and to change the way they've always viewed the world is not something that happens overnight. You know, and I think, again, just in the multi-layers of this film and the visual metaphors of this film, that's a thing that I think a lesser movie wouldn't have acknowledged. It would have been, oh, change right away, change right away. What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you, bigot? What's wrong with you, racist? What's wrong with you, sexist? That's not always the case. Sometimes it just takes folks a little bit longer to kind of adjust. And I think this film shows both sides, the bigot and the person just confronted by change. So is this film perfect? No, but honestly, the things that it's not really perfect in are very kind of nitpicky. There's not a lot that detracts from my enjoyment of this movie. I think it's got a lot going on. There are a lot of metaphors and a lot of just a lot of subtext. That's the word I've been looking for this whole review. I keep using the word metaphor, but I'm trying to say metaphor and subtext. There's a lot of subtext going on. Subtext that you can dig and dig and dig. I haven't touched on even a quarter of it. There's the Adam and Eve visual cues. There's, the subtle social commentary of them starting to call the people who are colorized colored. There's a lot going on. And at times it feels like there's so much going on that digging through it kind of feels daunting. And there are times I was like, man, I wish they would kind of narrow the focus a little bit and pick one thing to kind of go after, and maybe that would have streamlined this whole process just a little bit more. But in contrast to that, by having so much, what it ensures is that everybody gets something out of it. Like I said at the beginning, I consider this film a work of art. And a good work of art, the breaking down of it is subjective. What I get out of it and what I see in it is not maybe what someone else sees in it. The whole William H. Macy thing I just went on and on about, someone else may watch and not see that. So I think by having so much in there, what they're ensuring is that everybody can kind of get what they need out of it. They can pick on the metaphors and the visual cues and the subtext that they see, but maybe no one else really picks up on it. If you don't pick up on that, maybe it wasn't meant for you. Kind of another thing that hit me as I was watching it this time, and I don't blame this on the movie. I blame this kind of on the times the movie was made in, the late 90s. And that is, so sex is kind of like all things. It's what gets the ball rolling. It's the abnormal thing thrown into this society that starts things kind of unraveling and then being raveled up in a new way, however you want to look at it. So the concept of sexual freedom is big in here, introducing the teens to sex, introducing older people to masturbation, things of that nature. So if the sexual revolution is what starts all this rolling, why then, when people are starting to embrace these new ideas, why then were there no same-sex couples? Maybe there is in the background somewhere and I didn't see it, but it's not made prominent. And wouldn't, if this film was going to be remade today, don't fucking do that. That'd be something that you'd push a little bit more to the forefront, And I don't blame that exclusion on the movie. I blame it more on the times the movie was made. In the late 90s, gay culture was just, for lack of better terms, coming out. In America, much like the people of Pleasantville, were still trying to assimilate it. And the representation of homosexual characters was minimal. The ones that there were, you could raise questions as to how accurate they were. So it was a lot that, we were dealing with culturally at the time that we didn't know how to process. And I think that's what kind of warranted the exclusion in this film. Likewise, interesting, there are no black people in Pleasantville. And I don't know, I think that's because they use the racism allegory so much with, no coloreds allowed. One of the characters, and it turns out this was a fairly common name. I didn't know that until I saw an episode of Leave It to Beaver where they called the kid this. One of the guys driving around town harassing the coloreds' name was Whitey. Which it turns out, from what I understand, was actually a common nickname for blonde kids back then, back in the 50s. So I think if they'd added black, Hispanic, any kind of ethnicity to it. I don't know how that would have affected what they were already going for, but it is a fairly obvious omission. I think they told at the very end, when the world does become all color and everything opens up, they should have had some black people, even in the background, just going, there you go. But it is an odd omission. But again, I think it's omitted not out of insensitivity, but just out of the metaphor they were going with. So I guess the biggest thing I can say about this movie that is negative, and this is a stupid thing to harp on, but it's what I am going to harp on, is that I feel like they oversimplified the world of Pleasantville too much. I think it's way, way too oversimplified. As someone who has watched, shows, my family and I love MeTV. We love watching the old shows. I've seen my share of Father Knows Best and Donna Reed and Leave It to Beaver and My Three Sons. And yes, those shows are they are oversimplified. They are naive, and they are, at their worst, there is a lot of sexist elements to them. I remember, off on a tangent here, this video is already running long, but I don't care, no one's watching them all the way through anyway. I remember watching an episode of Father Knows Best, or watching a bunch of episodes of Father Knows Best, and going, okay, this isn't so bad. It's kind of naive, but it's not really bad. It's idealized for the time, but it's not, anything I'd find terrible. And then they did an episode where the mother, one day, decides she's going to leave the house. She didn't do the cooking. She didn't do the cleaning. She left the house. And she acted like a complete harlot. She went down to the French Quarter. Apparently, small town USA has a French Quarter, where she just hoarded up. She bought herself a new hat, the bitch. She had a portrait done of her by a street painter, harlot. And literally, the episode is the Robert Young and the kids going, but why did you leave the house? Why would you go down there? Why isn't the cooking done? And I'm like, oh, that's why. So, little detour, but to paint the picture that I know these shows, and I know at their best and the worst, but here's the thing, is I think this movie oversimplified for the purposes of its own merit. For instance, one of the things that they do is that all the books in the library are blank until Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon kind of fill them in, and now people are reading. And the stuff they're reading are, of course, books and Catcher in the Rye, that kind of thing. But here's the thing. Those shows had books in them. At least 3 of them had episodes where little Junior, Bud, or whatever, had to do a book report on Huckleberry Finn or something like that. Those shows acknowledged that there was a world outside their town. There usually was an adjacent town, that they would go to. Or I can think of episodes of My Three Sons where they went to Paris and Japan. So they were not this isolated little block, that, Pleasantville kind of does the whole, Main Street turns into, Elm Street, and that's all we're going to learn in geography. They acknowledged, history and, all of that. The white male version of it, but they acknowledged it. They had rain. They knew what rain was. So, I think in order to secure the joke and to push the metaphor forward, I think they went a little too far in making fun of the subject matter, to a point of unbelievability in the early goings. And again, I know they're doing that for comic effect. I don't know if it's that just to be a contrast to the seriousness that's going to come later. I don't know if that was like a studio thing where it was like, you've got to make this goofier because we're gonna try to sell this as a comedy. But it's kind of like when somebody does a parody of something, and all they're doing a parody of is saying, oh, this is so stupid. Mel Brooks said the only way to do a parody of something is you have to love it. because then you can point out the flaws and you can see them, and you're not just some jerk going, oh, this is stupid, this is stupid. And I feel like that's a little bit what the filmmakers are doing, is they're too busy saying how stupid those shows were and not really understanding the mechanics of them. And I think if they had understood the mechanics of them, I don't think it would have pushed their metaphor that far. I don't think they would have had to adjust that much in order to account for it. But that, again, along with other things, these are minor quibbles. I've talked for a long time on this one because there's a lot to talk about with this movie. It is the kind of movie that gives you things to talk about. And wow, isn't that something? So, as you're kind of hunkered down in your house or apartment or whatever, and you're looking for something to maybe reaffirm you that life can be beautiful, but that there is a price for that beauty, and that price for that beauty is sometimes dealing with the shit, and you want a film that may spark some interesting conversations, go back, give Pleasantville another shot. I think it's a gorgeous movie. I think it's a piece of art, and I was very happy. I was nervous about going back and rewatching it to talk about it, but I'm really glad I did. So that's Pleasantville. So we'll be back with some more Forgotten Gems. I hope everyone is keeping their chin up and, stay calm and soldier on, as Winston Churchill would say. Or keep calm and soldier on. My mistake. Misquoting. Keep calm and soldier on, and we'll be back with you. So until next time, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.